My name is Caroline Whitman, and for the longest time, I believed I was living inside a fairy tale. At 38, I had everything I thought a woman could ever dream of: a successful career as a published author, a beautiful brownstone apartment in Manhattan, and a husband, Mark, whose very voice seemed to melt away every shred of stress in me. He had a way of saying my name soft, deliberate, like it was a promise. Mornings began with a kiss on my forehead, and coffee brewed exactly the way I liked it, and nights ended with him whispering that I was his world. I believed him, until one night. It was close to midnight when I woke up to an empty bed. At first, I assumed Mark had gone downstairs for a snack or maybe to check on something. But then I heard it, his voice low and sharp coming from his home office. I froze. The tone wasn't familiar. It wasn't the playful warmth I knew. It was serious, calculated. "She still doesn't suspect anything," he said. My body turned to ice. The air thickened until every breath hurt. I slipped out of bed, pressed myself against the wall outside his office door, and listened. "Everything's going as planned. Almost done," he continued. I didn't need to hear more. I crept back to bed, lying still, pretending to sleep, when Mark returned minutes later. He slid under the covers with practiced calm, his hand resting lightly on my waist, as if he hadn't just shattered the foundation of my world. That night, I stared at the ceiling until the sun broke my mind, screaming silently. My husband was hiding something, and it involved me. The next morning, my body moved on autopilot. I walked into the kitchen, the house unnervingly quiet. Mark was still asleep, his breathing slow, steady, undeserving of peace. My hands trembled as I reached for my phone, and for the first time in our marriage, opened our banking app. He had always handled everything: bills, savings, investments. I thought that was what a good wife did. But as I scrolled, my breath caught. Transaction after transaction: $500 here, $1,000 there, $2,000 gone. Nothing massive on its own, but together the withdrawals formed a storm cloud I could no longer ignore. Months of steady bleeding, quiet and careful. Checking the account this early. His voice startled me. I spun around, clutching the phone. He leaned in the doorway, casual as ever, rubbing the back of his neck. But there it was, the flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Just curious," I murmured, forcing my voice steady. "Some of these charges look unfamiliar." He poured himself a cup of coffee and offered me a smile so rehearsed it almost hurt to look at. "Oh, those. Just a few small investments. I must have forgotten to mention them." He didn't meet my eyes. Something inside me snapped. Not anger, not yet, but something sharper, colder. I nodded slowly, pretending to accept his excuse. But from that moment, I watched him differently. Not with love, not with trust, but with clarity. That night, he was glued to his phone, always turning it face down, stepping out of the room to take calls. "Just business," he said each time I asked. But I knew better. My worry had calcified into resolve. I wasn't going to wait for his plan to unfold. I needed answers, and fast. 2 nights later, fate handed me an opportunity. After dinner, he went upstairs to shower, leaving his phone on the dining table for the first time in months. My heart pounded like a warning bell as I stared at it. 30 seconds. 60. The sound of running water upstairs. I reached for it. It was unlocked. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through his messages. Most were innocuous work reminders, casual chats. But then I saw it. A thread with no name, only a number. The most recent message chilled me to the bone. "Send her the Ilium files. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done." Her. Was it me? Were the files about me? My stomach twisted violently. I placed the phone back exactly where it had been and splashed cold water on my face in the kitchen sink, trying to steady my shaking breath. When Mark slid into bed later, he kissed my forehead like always. "You okay?" he asked softly. I smiled faintly, whispering, "Just tired." But inside I was screaming. He didn't know what I had seen. He still believed I was in the dark. That was his mistake, and I would use it. The next morning, as soon as Mark left for work, I called Anna. She wasn't just my best friend from college. She was one of the sharpest estate attorneys in Manhattan. I hadn't spoken to her much in years, but right now she was the only person I could trust. When she picked up, my voice trembled as I told her everything: the late-night whispers, the withdrawals, the message about the Ilium files. She listened quietly, then asked one question that made my knees go weak. "How much money are we talking?" I swallowed. "Close to 500 million. There was silence, and then her voice returned firm and urgent. "Caroline, we need to move your assets. Now." Anna's words echoed in my ears like a gunshot. "Move your assets. Now." For years, I had trusted Mark with everything: our accounts, our investments, even the small details of my daily life. And now the very man I trusted with my heart and future was plotting to gut me, to leave me penniless, while he walked away with the fortune I had built from years of backbreaking work. I sank into the kitchen chair, my mind racing. 500 million. That wasn't just money. That was the essence of my life's labor: every deal I had fought for, every sleepless night I had poured into my business, every sacrifice I had made. And the idea of Mark smiling while tearing it away from me sent a rush of hot, bitter fury through my veins. Anna's voice pulled me back. "Caroline, are you still there?" "Yes," I whispered. "I'll need power of attorney," she said firmly. "And I'll need access to every account, every holding you can think of. Stocks, bonds, real estate, everything." The practical, efficient part of me, the part that had built my empire from scratch, clicked into gear. "Okay," I said. "I'll come by your office tomorrow morning." But even as I agreed, a hollow dread settled inside me. Tomorrow. What if tomorrow was too late? What if tonight Mark finalized whatever betrayal he was planning? That night, when he came home, I forced myself into the role I knew he expected: the doting wife, smiling, asking about his day, leaning into his kiss even though it burned me. Every word I spoke felt like I was swallowing glass. He talked about business, about dinner reservations with clients next week, about the possibility of buying a new vacation home. All lies. I wanted to scream, but I stayed quiet, because silence was my armor now. At 3 in the morning, when I was certain he was asleep, I slipped out of bed and padded down to the study. My fingers hovered over the keyboard as I logged into our accounts again. Every number, every transfer burned itself into my brain. I printed records quietly, tucking them into the bottom of a locked drawer in my closet. By dawn, I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a soldier preparing for war. The next day at Anna's office, she spread out the documents like evidence in a courtroom. "He's siphoning little by little," she said, pointing to the trail of transactions. "He's careful, but not careful enough. If we move everything at once, it'll be obvious. We need to outplay him, quietly, methodically." For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of control. "How?" Anna leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "We set up a trust, offshore accounts, shell corporations. You'll still control it all, but on paper it'll look untouchable. If he files for divorce tomorrow, he'll be grasping at air." The thought filled me with a mix of triumph and sorrow. This was my husband, the man I once believed would shield me from the world. Now I was hiding my fortune from him as if he were a thief breaking into my home. But wasn't he? When I came home that evening, Mark was waiting for me, his smile too bright, too polished. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice soft but laced with suspicion. "Lunch with a friend," I lied smoothly. He studied me for a moment, and I thought he might press further. But then he leaned down, kissed me lightly, and whispered, "You look tired, get some rest." I nodded, walking upstairs, my heart hammering. He knew something, or maybe I was just paranoid. Either way, I couldn't falter. For the next week, Anna and I worked in secret. Every morning I put on the mask of the loving wife. Every afternoon I stripped it away and became the strategist, the fighter. Money flowed into new accounts under layers of legal protection. Properties were shifted into trusts. Stocks were quietly transferred. But the more I moved, the more I noticed Mark's behavior change. He became jumpier, his eyes narrowing whenever I left the house. He started checking my phone, asking questions about where I had been, who I had spoken to. It was as if the walls of our marriage had turned into a battlefield, and every smile, every touch was a weapon cloaked in silk. One night he came into the bedroom holding 2 glasses of wine. "To us," he said, handing me one. I froze. The memory of the late-night whispers, the secret messages, the betrayal all flashed through my mind. My fingers tightened around the stem of the glass. "To us," I repeated, forcing a smile. But I didn't drink. Later, when he had gone to bed, I poured the wine into the sink. And as the crimson liquid swirled down the drain, I wondered if my husband had tried to poison more than just my trust. By the end of the week, the transition was complete. My fortune was safe, every penny, every asset out of his reach. For the first time since that night I overheard him, I breathed freely. But I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. Because Mark was going to realize soon enough that his plan had failed, and when he did, he wouldn't go quietly. I had prepared for that. I was ready. Mark's unraveling began with small cracks. At first, it was just his silence at the breakfast table, his eyes fixed too long on his phone. Then it became questions sharpened into accusations. "Who were you with yesterday?" he asked one evening, his voice steady, but his knuckles white around a glass. "You've been disappearing a lot lately." I swallowed the urge to laugh bitterly. Disappearing. He was the one who had been planning a secret life behind my back. But I couldn't tip my hand yet. Just errands. "You know how it is," I said lightly, stirring sugar into my tea, though my hands trembled with the weight of secrets he didn't know I carried. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with that unsettling calm he used when negotiating business deals. "You've changed," he said, and in his tone I heard not just suspicion but fear. He was right, I had changed. I was no longer the woman who believed every word that left his lips. I was no longer the wife who trusted blindly. I was a woman who had seen the monster hiding behind his smile, and I wasn't going to let him win. The moment of truth came on a Tuesday afternoon. I came home early from a meeting with Anna, papers still clutched in my bag. As I stepped inside, I heard him in the living room, his voice low but urgent. "She's on to me. I don't know how much she knows, but the money isn't where it should be. You told me this would work." His words hissed through the phone like poison. I froze in the hallway, my heart thundering. He paused, listening to whoever was on the other end, then snapped, "No, I can't wait any longer. File it. File the divorce. Now." The sound tore through me like glass. Divorce. He wasn't just planning, he was ready to strike. I pressed my back to the wall, my nails digging into my palms as tears burned my eyes. For a moment, grief threatened to pull me under. This was the man I had loved, the man I had promised forever to. And here he was, willing to destroy me for money, to cast me aside like I was nothing. But then a different fire rose in me. Rage. Vindication. He thought he could play me for a fool. He thought he could rob me of my life's work and walk away untouched. He had no idea I was already 10 steps ahead. I slipped upstairs silently, my mind already spinning. When he discovered the money was gone, he would come for me. He would try to break me down, to intimidate me. And when that moment came, I would be ready. It didn't take long. 2 days later, he confronted me in the kitchen. His face was pale, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought it might shatter. "Where is it?" he demanded. I feigned confusion. "Where's what?" "The accounts," he snapped. "The money." "Don't play dumb with me, Caroline." His voice rose, echoing off the marble counters. I set down my coffee cup with deliberate calm, my heart pounding, but my face composed. "I don't know what you're talking about." He slammed his fist against the counter, making me flinch despite myself. "Do you think I'm stupid? I know you've been moving things. You've ruined everything." In that moment, I saw the man he truly was. Not the charming husband who had wooed me with sweet words, but a predator whose mask had finally cracked. His eyes burned with fury, but beneath the rage I saw fear. He had lost control, and I had taken it. I straightened my spine and met his gaze. "Whatever you thought you were going to take from me, Mark, it's gone. You'll never touch it." For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy between us. Then he laughed, cold and sharp. "Do you really think this is over? You can't hide forever. Divorce court will drag everything out into the open. I'll still get my share." I smiled faintly, though my insides quaked. "Maybe. But you'll never see what you wanted. And the truth about you, that will come out too." His face twisted, rage giving way to something almost desperate. "You'll regret this," he spat and stormed out of the room, his footsteps echoing like thunder through the hall. When the door slammed, I let out the breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My hands shook violently as I gripped the counter for support. Tears welled in my eyes, not from fear, but from release. For the first time, I had faced him without crumbling. That night, I called Anna again. My voice was steady now. "He knows," I said simply. "Let him," she replied. "The courts won't be on his side, not with what we've documented." Her words gave me strength. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back. But even as I lay in bed later staring at the ceiling while Mark slept beside me, I knew this was far from finished. He wasn't the type of man to surrender gracefully, and the storm he was about to unleash would test me in ways I had never imagined. I was ready. The storm began quietly, like the tightening of a noose I didn't realize was already around my neck. Mark didn't shout, didn't rage. Instead, he smiled too much, too smoothly, as though he were playing the role of the loving husband again. But beneath that mask, I could see the cracks. 2 days later, I received the first call. It was from a mutual friend, Clara, her voice hesitant. "Caroline, I heard something. Mark said you've been unstable, that you've been hiding money. People are talking." I thanked her, hung up, and sat in silence. So this was his game character assassination. If he couldn't steal my fortune, he would try to strip me of my reputation. Soon the whispers grew louder. At dinners, people glanced at me with pity, their smiles tight. Invitations to charity galas that once arrived weekly suddenly dried up. In the glossy magazines that once praised my work, subtle articles hinted at financial troubles and marital strains. His hand was everywhere, pulling strings, twisting the narrative. The weight of betrayal pressed down heavier each day. It wasn't enough for Mark to plan a divorce. He wanted to destroy me completely. And for a while I feared he might succeed. I cried in the shower where no one could hear me. I wrote in journals late at night, scribbling furiously to stop myself from unraveling. Some mornings I couldn't bring myself to rise from bed, the ache in my chest too heavy. But then I'd remember Anna's voice, "Let him." So I gathered my strength. One morning I stood in front of the mirror, my eyes red but my spine straight. "You will not break me," I whispered to my reflection. The woman staring back wasn't the naive wife who believed in fairy tales. She was a warrior dressed in scars. When the legal papers arrived, I wasn't surprised. Divorce. Grounds: irreconcilable differences. His lawyers claimed he had supported me financially and deserved a significant portion of my assets. I almost laughed. Supported me. My empire existed long before Mark ever touched my life. With Anna at my side, we filed our counterclaim. We presented documents, records, and testimony that exposed the truth, the quiet withdrawals, the secret communications, the betrayal. Piece by piece, we dismantled his carefully spun web. The courtroom became a battlefield. Mark arrived in tailored suits, flanked by attorneys with sharp tongues. He would flash me that smile across the room, the same one he used to give me at candlelit dinners, as if daring me to crumble. But I didn't. I sat tall, my hands steady, my gaze unwavering. And when the judge asked for evidence, I produced it without hesitation. Every sheet of paper was a shield, every record a weapon. Still, he fought back, slinging mud where he could. He told the court I was manipulative, cold, incapable of love. He painted himself as the wounded husband betrayed by an ungrateful wife. And for a moment, I saw jurors' faces soften with sympathy. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, doubt gnawing at me. Was I strong enough to withstand this? Could I truly win? But then I remembered the night I had overheard his whispers, the chilling certainty in his voice. "She doesn't suspect anything." He had underestimated me then. He would not do it again. The turning point came when Anna presented the message thread, the one I had found on his phone. The judge read it aloud. "Send her the Ilium files. Just make sure she stays in the dark. Almost done." Mark's mask slipped. For the first time I saw panic flicker in his eyes. The courtroom shifted. Whispers spread like wildfire. And in that moment I knew the tide had turned. But even victory tasted bitter. I hadn't wanted this war. I hadn't wanted to expose the man I once loved. Yet here I was, bleeding in public, my private pain dissected for all to see. After court that day, I walked out into the crisp air, the city buzzing around me. For a moment, I leaned against the courthouse steps, closing my eyes. The battle wasn't over, but I had survived another day. And each day I survived, I grew stronger. Because this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about reclaiming myself, my dignity, my voice. Mark could try to destroy me, but he didn't realize by pushing me into this fight he had forged something unbreakable within me. And when the final verdict came, it wouldn't just be about justice. It would be about vindication. The days that followed were a blur of hearings, depositions, and sharp exchanges between lawyers. Each session felt like being flayed alive, every word exposing wounds I had once kept hidden behind closed doors. Mark never missed an opportunity to sneer across the courtroom, to whisper to his attorneys to make me feel as if I were still the fragile wife under his thumb. But something in me had shifted. I wasn't fragile anymore. The gossip swirled relentlessly in society circles. Friends I once trusted avoided my calls. Old acquaintances treated me like a scandalous headline. It was lonely, unbearably so, but in the stillness of my solitude I found clarity. Money had never truly been the point for Mark. It was power. And what he couldn't stomach was the fact that I had stripped it away from him before he could taste victory. The trial's climax arrived on a gray Friday morning. The courtroom was packed. Journalists scribbled furiously, cameras clicked from the hallway. The air felt electric, heavy with anticipation. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Anna, my heart pounding, my palms damp. Mark entered late, his suit immaculate, his expression smug. He carried himself like a man convinced of triumph, nodding to the reporters, as if he were a celebrity on the red carpet. He didn't look at me until he sat down, and when he did, his smile was ice. The proceedings began. His lawyers argued, first painting him as a loving husband, blindsided by a cold, calculating wife who had hidden money from him. Their voices dripped with conviction, their words carefully chosen to pierce the hearts of the jury. I could feel eyes on me, judging, questioning. When it was our turn, Anna rose with a calm that silenced the room. Your Honor, she began, her voice steady. This case is not about an ungrateful wife hiding assets. This case is about a man who plotted, manipulated, and attempted to rob his spouse of everything she worked for. She laid out the evidence with surgical precision. The bank records, the late-night withdrawals, the phone messages. Each piece struck like a hammer on stone, cracking away the polished veneer Mark had constructed. And then came the message, the one about the Ilium files. It was projected on a screen for all to see. The words seemed to echo in the courtroom. She doesn't suspect anything. Almost done. Mark shifted in his chair. For the first time, his confidence faltered. His eyes darted, his jaw tightened. The mask he wore so carefully began to crumble. Anna pressed forward. This wasn't carelessness. This was calculated betrayal. A betrayal not just of marriage vows, but of trust, dignity, and humanity. The judge's gaze lingered on Mark, sharp and unyielding. When I took the stand, my voice trembled at first but steadied as I spoke. I told them about the night I overheard his whispers, about the transactions that drained our accounts, about the way he looked me in the eye while planning my ruin. I told them about the nights I cried in silence, the mornings I wore a mask so no one would see the cracks. And then I said I loved him. I gave him my trust, my heart, my life. And he tried to make me a stranger in my own home. That is not love. That is theft. The silence that followed was deafening. When the closing arguments ended, the judge recessed briefly before returning with the decision. My chest tightened as he began to read. Words blurred, my ears ringing until I caught the one phrase that shattered everything. All claims by Mr. Whitman are hereby denied. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I turned to Anna, who squeezed my hand, her smile small but fierce. Across the room, Mark's face drained of color, his jaw slack. His empire of lies had collapsed in a single sentence. He stood abruptly, knocking over his chair, his voice breaking the heavy silence. This isn't over, he spat, pointing at me with trembling hands. You'll pay for this, Caroline. The bailiff stepped forward, warning him, but I stayed still, my heart steady. For the first time, his threats didn't touch me. They bounced off the armor I had forged from his betrayal. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed, shouting questions, flashing cameras. I walked past them with my head high, the weight of months of torment lifting from my shoulders. My fortune was safe. My dignity was intact. And my freedom, my precious freedom, was finally mine. Yet as I slipped into the waiting car, tears filled my eyes. Not of sadness, not entirely, but of grief for the woman I once was, the woman who believed love would protect her. She was gone now, buried beneath the ashes of betrayal. In her place stood someone new. I looked out the window at the city, alive and endless, and whispered to myself, you survived. But survival wasn't the end. It was the beginning of everything. The courthouse victory should have been the end of my nightmare, but endings are rarely so neat. For weeks after the judgment, I lived as if waiting for the other shoe to drop. Every phone call startled me. Every shadow on the street made me glance twice. Mark's last words in that courtroom. "This isn't over," echoed like a ghost. He tried, of course. He launched smear campaigns in the press, feeding them lies about me. He called old friends, weaving stories of betrayal. But the world had already seen enough of his unraveling. His desperation only painted him as the bitter man he had become. Doors closed to him. Investors backed away. Even the friends who once laughed at his jokes now crossed the street to avoid him. I should have felt triumphant watching his empire collapse, but instead I felt hollow. Revenge doesn't taste like honey. It tastes like ash, bitter and dry. Because no matter how much justice you win, it doesn't give you back the years you lost or the love you thought was real. Still, life has a way of nudging you forward even when your heart lingers in the past. I rebuilt slowly. I took back control of my company, poured my focus into projects that mattered. I traveled not to escape, but to remember there was a world beyond betrayal. One evening, months later, I found myself at a gala I almost hadn't attended. I stood in a silver gown under glittering chandeliers, the air thick with chatter and champagne. And across the room I saw him, Mark. He was thinner, his suit hanging looser, his face etched with the strain of defeat. Our eyes met for the briefest second, and in that moment I didn't see my husband. I saw a stranger, a man who had gambled love for greed and lost everything. He looked away first. I turned back to my glass of wine, my hands steady. That was when I knew I had won. Not because the court had ruled in my favor, not because I had protected my fortune, but because he no longer had power over me. His shadow no longer defined me. Later that night, alone on my balcony, the city lights shimmering below, I let the tears finally come. They weren't tears of sorrow, but of release. I whispered into the night, "You don't own me anymore." And the wind carried the words away light as freedom itself. The scars remain, of course. Betrayal carves deep and love turned to poison leaves marks you can't wash off. But scars are not just wounds, they are proof you survived, proof you endured, proof you rose. And as I stand here now telling you my story, I hope you see more than just pain. I hope you see strength. I hope you see that even in the darkest betrayals there is a way back to yourself. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is not destroying the person who hurt you. It is refusing to let them destroy you. So if you're watching this, if you've ever felt the sting of betrayal, know this. You are stronger than the lies, stronger than the whispers, stronger than the people who try to break you. Your story doesn't end in the shadows they cast. It ends where you choose to step into the light. That is what I did, and that is why I'm still here. If my story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who may need courage, and subscribe for more stories that remind us we are never alone in our struggles. And don't forget to leave a comment. I want to hear your voice too.